For just one time, I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and make a Northwest Passage to the sea.
Westward from the Davis Strait, 'tis there 'twas said to lie, the sea route to the Orient, for which so many died, seeking gold and glory, leaving weathered, broken bones, and a long forgotten, lonely cairn of stones.
For just one time, I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and make a Northwest Passage to the sea.
The story of Canada is a journey, the search for passages. The breadth and wildness of the land have long been Canadian themes.
Whatever happened to the Franklin explorers?
They didn't find the passage. They were lost, frozen in the ice.
One of them has been found and is now on the dissection table at the University of Alberta. A case study for future academics.
That was a living person you were talking about. Canada was alive too, a spirit we breathed, felt, sang, and wrote about.
The maple leaf forever.
One nation from sea to sea.
Deux nations, plusieurs cultures.
The true north, strong and free.
Old slogans don't ring true anymore.
Right now, an older comment sounds closer to the truth. Monsieur Voltaire said Canada is
Quelques hectares de neige.
a few acres of snow.
It's easy to define ourselves in negatives. We're not Americans.
We're not British.
We're
We're sure as hell not French either. And Landers says we're peaceful people, not like some.
But it's hard to say what holds us together.
Well, the railway still runs.
But not as a connector for people anymore.
The crown is still there.
As a legal entity, not as a motivating force. And with free trade, we don't even have the illusion of our own economy.
Our national institution.
Just add to the controversy.
The Bank of Canada.
The CBC.
Canada Post.
Bilingualism.
The GST.
With old connections like passenger trains and Terrace gone, and you are once in doubt, it's time to ask again, what is Canada?
Canada is a geographical expression.
Canada occupies the northern half of the North American continent, comprising a territory greater than the subcontinent of India.
Expressions of what? Look at our borders on a map.
Most countries have squiggly lines that follow rivers and mountain ranges.
Our borders are straight. Surveys and political decisions.
What about the 5 physical regions we learned about in school?
Most of our physical regions, Appalachia, Cordillera, the Central Plain, are common to Canada and the U.S. Some continue down into Mexico.
Only one landform, the Canadian Shield, lies fully in Canada. So while Canada reflects geography,
It is not a geographical expression.
Well, Canada is an economic unit. Trade helped us to bring us together in 1867.
But it was a secondary factor.
But for 20 years before Confederation, the Canadian colonies had free trade with the U.S.
Before that, we were part of the British economy.
Well, then Canada's economy has always been a satellite?
First of the British Empire, then of the American one.
What about Canadian culture?
Canada is not a single cultural entity. It has no common religion or language.
It has no single history or ideology.
That makes us unique then, doesn't it?
Unique among modern states, a voluntary association of any of the common features that hold other states together.
Some unique.
And that's all we've got going for us. Why bother?
Why delude ourselves that we even have a country?
All this bilingualism in Canadian content is a waste of
Then
time.
let's go our separate ways and get on with our lives.
Wait a minute. We never said we had a common language or viewpoint or any of those things.
We've lived together for more than 100 years, haven't we?
We're respected in the world. People still choose to come here.
Why?
How did we make it?
What is Canada anyway?
C'est quoi le Canada?
Canada is a nation of minorities, born out of a historical consensus, built up by technology, and held together by a commitment to spiritual values that are international in scope.
4 aspects. A nation of minorities, consensus, technology, spiritual values.
Let us look at each of these. Canada is a nation of minorities. No one racial group makes up even a third of our population.
So there's no such thing as a Canadian majority?
Only shifting coalitions. What we call majorities are illusory, temporary alliances between regions.
So no one province or region can single-handedly dominate the whole?
English Canada is an amalgam of Ontario and the West.
A coalition that falls apart when it comes to economic interests.
It was this English majority, so-called, that tried to impose conscription on their Francophone fellow citizens in 1918 and 1944. Central Canada, that's the Western and Maritime bogeyman, one that lumps together Ontario and Quebec.
And different languages and different economic interests.
It was a coalition of the West and Quebec that won the free trade debate.
Over the objections of Ontario.
And it was an alliance of Ontario and Quebec that imposed the so-called national policy on the West and Maritimes in Macdonald's time.
And the NEP and our own.
These attempts to impose a national majority will have been dangerous and divisive.
So if we want Canada to survive, we have to find alternatives to the simplism of majority rules?
Alternatives that reflect the reality of the Canadian consensus.
Well, that's how we got the Meech Lake Accord.
That's why we want the Triple E Senate.
Westerners are quick to point this out when it comes to economic issues, but forgetful when it comes to language, often demanding that French Canadians speak the language of the majority outside Quebec.
Easterners paint Westerners as bigots on the language issue and then steamroll over Western economic interests.
And we both forget Atlantic Canadians when it comes to transportation.
And our Northerners and Native people on language and economic issues.
Canada is a voluntary consensus. The colonies, regions, peoples that joined Confederation did so as the result of a conscious decision. Saskatchewan and Alberta were the only provinces created by the federal government.
And the others already had their own governments and came in by bargaining.
And even before they had democratic institutions, Canadians showed themselves distinct from other settlers in North America.
Quebec refused to join the American Revolution.
And its resistance of invasion provided a haven for English-speaking loyalists from the 13 colonies.
Maritime colonies made a similar choice.
And so did British Columbia 100 years later.
In fact, the peoples in every part of what is now Canada decided, more or less consciously at some time, not to join the American experiment to the south. They did this not out of antipathy to the Americans, but because they had values of their own they wanted to see preserved. Pluralism was one of these values.
The Quebecers and Maritimers didn't refuse the offer of the American majority, just to disappear in a Canadian one.
They chose to live under a framework in which their separate identities could be maintained. For many years, the Crown protected these identities in Canada.
It still does in Britain.
More recently, with continental drift, bilingualism, federalism, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms have become the guarantors of our pluralism.
And Canadians should remember that it was Quebec who was in the forefront of this evolution.
It was Quebec's refusal to join the American Revolution that provided a continuing British presence in North America.
And when the other fathers of Confederation wanted a unitary system, it was Quebec's insistence on guarantees for its distinctiveness that led to a federal one.
Were it not for Quebec, Canadians wouldn't have provincial governments at all. We'd be living under a unitary system dominated by Toronto.
Were it not for the distinct society recognized in the Quebec Act in 1774, Canadians wouldn't have their distinct country 2 centuries later. Canadian consensus has been a largely peaceful one. Canada is the only modern nation to emerge without revolution or civil war.
Another bit of heritage from Quebec.
French Canadians refused to serve king and country in the 2 world wars.
You should remember that it was the same pacifist stand that kept us under the British Crown during the American Revolution.
Canada is a nation of minorities.
Born out of consensus.
And built up by technology.
Canada was first put together by railways and canals.
Today's satellite and microwave.
Many institutions had the Canadian Connection as their reason for being. The first Trans-Canada Railway.
Trans-Canada
The
Highway.
Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Trans-Canada Airlines, now Air Canada.
The Trans-Canada Radio Network of Canadian National Railways.
Huh?
Now the CBC.
The Trans-Canada sense is often lost. Today, Canada's national newspaper is a Toronto newspaper.
At the time of Confederation, technology was the servant of the national will, and now it has a will of its own. Look at deregulation, free trade, and consumer choice. With seat sales and motorhomes and satellite dishes in every backyard, it's easier for Canadians to know the world than to know each other and the values for which our country was created.
But Canada was and still is an expression of spiritual values, a spirit of human dignity and cooperation, of peaceful resolution of differences.
Tenacity in the struggle with the elements, interconnectedness with each other and the wider world.
These were values for which Marguerite Bourgeois and others left comfort and affluence to carve out new lives in the new world.
And for which our forebears chose compromise rather than conflict.
Struggle and accommodation with the elements is reflected in our folklore.
And the wind sure planned blow cold away out there.
Mon pays, ce n'est pas un pays, c'est l'hiver.
The first Canadians have much to show us on living in harmony with the land, a wisdom we're just beginning to discover.
Our commitment to struggle and perseverance was noted by Peter Ustinov when he said, "To the average Russian, life is hard. You in Canada can understand that better than most other peoples." This ability to understand others who are different has kept us together and enabled us to be a bridge on the international scene. We can still understand the French and British who first explored and colonized our country. We remain active in their respective commonwealths. We can understand the hegemony of modern Europe.
Living under an evolving federal system ourselves.
We can even enjoy the gung-ho enthusiasm of the Americans. Our northern location and native and Ukrainian peoples may be a bridge to the USSR.
And our bilingualism has brought unexpected connections with the third world, as French-speaking nations seek North American technology. Our very lack of definition in a world of national markets and boundaries will be an asset in the new age of internationalism.
This is the Canadian heritage, the spiritual legacy we bring to the 21st century.
Whatever the political system by which the Canadas relate, these links remain.
In the past 400 years, Canada's had at least 6 constitutions.
Each has been an attempt to facilitate human relations on a half-continent in a changing world.
Our present concern should not be with constitutions, though, but with connectedness. How best we can express these values in our relationship to each other.
Canada is a nation of minorities,
Born
in consensus,
And
built
up
by technology, and held together by commitment to spiritual values.
We have overridden geography and economics, language and culture to become a more modern, pluralistic state with an outward international orientation.
We have shaped a new order that mixed the empires of the 18th and 19th century with the still emerging globalism of the 21st, without becoming bogged down in nationalism.
The story of Canada is a journey in time.
How then am I so different from the first men through this way? Like them I led a severed life, I threw it all away. To seek the Northwest Passage at the call of many men, to find their buffalo back home again. Ah, for just one time I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and make a Northwest Passage to the sea.